You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for Building the Broncos. I'm your host, Carl Dumler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, how are you doing, buddy?
Hey, doing pretty well. Just enjoying life. It's going to be a good weekend. Can't wait. A lot of fun things happening. College game days going to Ames for the Iowa State game, which is fun. And the Broncos are opening up the season, and I have tickets for the Cardinals Brewers on Sunday. So it's going to be a good sports weekend. Man,
that NL Central, man. I know some of the people here are probably not big NL Central people, but you and I, the Cardinals, Cubs, Brewers, all right there, man. Coming down to the wire. Going to be fun to watch that.
Losing Christian Yelich for the season probably kills it for the Brewers, but it's still a good team. I mean, in the World Series last year, so that's we'll see what happens, but it should be a good game. Hopefully the Cardinals can hold on to it. I know the Rockies just beat them 2 games in a row, so man, I don't know what it is with the Cardinals. They're playing well against good teams and stinking against bad, it seems, down the stretch, but we'll see what happens.
I know. It's always tough to be a Cardinals fan because they leave you scratching your head, especially the last couple of years. But it is what it is, and thankfully we got football back, like you said. Broncos have their first home game. Very excited about that. This is a game many people expect them to lose, but hey, home in September. We've already said it on here many times. We'll talk about that here as we get through this episode. And we also want to make sure that you can find us on Twitter because you'll be able to see our articles and conversations, everything else. You can find me at Carl Dumler MHH, and of course Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, a new affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. And know that this podcast is powered by Overtime Media.
Fantasy football season is here, and this season there are more ways to win than ever before. Because FanDuel has more ways to win cash prizes and once-in-a-lifetime experiences during every single game, every single week. Never played FanDuel Fantasy Football before? Great! Because new users get $20 in site credit if they deposit $20. And even though the Denver Broncos might be off to a poor start this season, there's plenty of reason to be still excited about football because, of course, you can win some money playing fantasy football. Obviously, this week, the Broncos are going to be going up the Chicago Bears, so, hey, maybe you can pick both defenses. Who the heck knows? It's not going to be a high-scoring game, but either way, you can win even if the Broncos lose. Sign up for FanDuel now and get $20 in total bonuses. Just make sure you make your first deposit of $20 to get started, and you'll get an extra $5 in site credit every week for 4 weeks. Go to FanDuel.com/DFS Fantasy or download the FanDuel app today.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right. Well, we have the Chicago Bears coming to town. And I've always thought it's been kind of crazy. The last few times that the Broncos have played the Bears, there's always been kind of like some crazy storylines behind it. I think, was it Jay Cutler was playing for him last time we played the Bears?
No, maybe. I remember.
Or was that the time before?
I think, I really do not, I cannot remember. I think Cutler was playing, but the thing that I remember from the last start was it was Brock Osweiler's first start of his career, and it landed on his birthday. And the Broncos won in Chicago.
That's right.
So that was a good one. And then the time before that, because it's obviously every 4 years that you rotate the NFC divisions, the Broncos beat Chicago in Denver in that game where Marion Barber stepped out of bounds and gave Tebow and Prater a chance to come back. And I was going to local liberal arts college in Rock Island, Illinois, and it's 70% Chicago student body. And man, obviously outspoken Broncos supporter. Everybody knew that. Everybody talking a lot of crap going up to the game. And then when that game happened, man, it was crickets. It was very funny. I'm not much of a shit talker, honestly. I'd much rather debate the actual game than, the razzing. Like, I'll give my friends a hard time and whatnot, but like, just general crap talk, not my thing. But man, if I was, they would never have heard the end of it. I think we also had like edits of like Tim Tebow, All I Do Is Win going on, and the Skip Bayless song. Mm-hmm. So I guess I did troll a little bit. I was in a fraternity, and I gave a lot of those guys a hard time about that, but knew it was going to come to an end. Man, that was a crazy year for sure.
My favorite was the Thursday night game 2015 against the Chiefs. As I had that entire week, Chiefs fans just talking crap left and right. And boom, all of a sudden, Broncos win that game in that dramatic fashion with Jamal Charles fumbling. And oh my gosh, I mean, you could hear people yelling from their houses. You could hear them a block away. It was that crazy of how mad they were at that moment. And like, people avoided me like the plague that whole week. And I just had the biggest smile on my face. I wasn't even going to say anything. I didn't have to. They were already that ticked off. So it was a lot of fun that week for me. But, so yeah, I understand being around fans that unfortunately cheer for the other team, I guess, that the Broncos are playing. But Bears are coming to town this year. We got their old defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio, coming to town. Had them as the number 1 ranked defense in all of football last year. And it wasn't even close. I mean, if you look at DVOA, they were just miles ahead of everybody else on defense. First in passing, second in rushing. But as we saw in that first game for the Bears, that offense holding them back once again. I mean, they went 12-4 with a bad offense last year, 20th ranked, 21st passing, 19th rushing. And so far this season, doesn't look like they've gotten off to any better start. If anything, looks like they've regressed maybe some on offense. And I guess, I mean, not much has really changed for their team from last year to this year, right?
For the Bears, I mean, I feel like we'll have to obviously dive into this team, but I do like the weapons on their offense, specifically in the pass game, a little bit more, and some maturation from the offensive line. But other than that, I don't see much changing specifically on that offensive side. Right.
I mean, they did have Adrian Amos last year, who's now with the Packers, who had the game-sealing interception. I mean, how sweet would that be? To be going to the team that wouldn't pay you, or facing the team that wouldn't pay you, and getting the game-winning interception just to kind of rub it in their face of, you should have paid me.
Yeah, that would be great. But, you know, those storylines are fun for us. I don't know how much of an impact it's actually going to make on the game, but it's always good for the narrative side of things.
Right. And so I guess let's just start with Vic Fangio coming to the Broncos. And for the Bears, you look at that defense, and they definitely have a lot of talent. And I just want to start with this question for you. How much does them losing Vic Fangio hurt them?
I think it hurts maybe 10-15%, but as you know, a common thing I like to say on here, great players make great coaches. And the Bears still have the identity of that team. I mean, the Broncos lost Wade Phillips and a bunch of guys in that 2015 to 2016 season, and that defense was still flying around extremely good. I mean, that team, what'd they go, 8-8, 9-7 with Trevor Siemian under quarterback and that offensive line?
Yep.
I mean, granted, Gary Kubiak was still there. Maybe Wade was still there, but you got the pieces there. So I'm not really thinking they're going to take too much of a step back. And I think that they even have some younger guys that are coming into their own that we'll talk about here that really weren't as effective there last year. So it's still a great defense for the Bears. And, I mean, both these teams, it could be a battle of field goals and field position. So we'll definitely see. But they're still a great team. Losing Fangio, I think it's more of a long-term impact, though, than week 2 of this season.
Yeah. I at least, if it does become a field goal battle, I like our kicker a little more than theirs.
Yeah.
Which I think most Bears fans would agree that they'd take about any other kicker in the league than their own. It seems like. I don't know what it is about Bears kickers. They can't seem to get it together.
Well, it's the curse of Robbie Gould. They didn't want to pay him, so they let him walk, and they haven't been able to replace him. They tried to trade for him even, I think, if I recall. Or Robbie Gould tried to go back, and the 49ers tagged him or something. So it's...
Oh, man.
I know, you feel like good kickers go. You take that chance. I mean, right? The kickers are one of those things where you don't really care about them unless you have a bad one.
Yeah, same with offensive line. If you don't hear their name throughout the game, they probably did a pretty good job. If you're hearing their name a lot, it's probably because they're doing a terrible job.
See, that doesn't resonate for me. but that's because I grew up an Iowa fan, and if I'm going to watch any good players, they're probably on the offensive line. So I trained to watch for that.
Right. I'm just saying if the announcers don't say their name very often, it probably means they're not giving up sacks, they're not giving up hurries, all those kind of things. It's just they're having a good, quiet game. Same with cornerback. If you don't hear their name, it's probably because they're doing really good in coverage. And so it just, I mean, hopefully if it does come down to that, Broncos kicker can make one more. And maybe this time, since it is in Mile High, we can actually get that 64-yarder. That would be really, really nice for McManus because, oh, man, that was so close.
Yeah, I thought he had it. I really thought he had it. So, oh, well, what can you do?
All right, well, let's actually get into the game because, I mean, we are the dive deep people on this podcast and wanting to really break down what we see, how we would attack things, kind of the coaches and general managers' eye view of the game. And I wanted to I almost didn't do this to you, but I thought, man, he's just so good at this. I just wanted to give it to you. I wanted to give you the challenge because this is the Broncos have to do something on this side of the ball. I mean, obviously, just you got to score points. And so if you were the Broncos offense, how would you attack this Bears defense that looks just so good on every single level?
Well, honestly, it's going to be pretty basic and generic here, but the main thing is you can't let the Bears defense beat you. So that requires a little bit more of a conservative game plan overall. You have to be able to protect Flacco, not take those big sacks, and have another game where you limit turnovers, which is something that is going to be difficult. The Broncos will have the advantage of playing in Mile High, but really you got to help your defense. So that means running the ball effectively, ball control offense, pretty much do what the Raiders did last week, the first half. The Broncos had the ball for like 11 minutes and only 3 possessions. Like if you can do that because your offense is able to just control the flow of the game, doesn't have to be explosive. I mean, 10 points in the first half would be fine if you're controlling the ball that well and limiting the Bears and not giving the Bears offense good field position. I do want them to run more play action. I know it's a common misconception. I mean, you see it in Madden, you see coaches talk about it, that you have to establish the run game or be effective running the football for play action to be effective. Folks, that's not true. That's absolutely not true. There's data driven that it's not true. So I want to see more play action, more under center play calling in that regard. I understand that you're trying to protect Flacco, give him a chance, you're playing shotgun, but the Broncos, if they were under center last week, they were running the football. If they were in shotgun, they were throwing it. And that's that level of, what's the word I'm looking for here? There's no disguise in that regard. So you got to, throw it more from under center and run it more from shotgun just to get those tendency breakers out there. And honestly, I am looking to use Noah Fant. He had a bad game. I mean, just let's be point blank against the Raiders last week, especially on the offensive line, but he needs to go out there and help Wilkinson. So I'm using a lot of, stuff where he's giving the chips and then slipping out. So the quick, little boop, helping with Khalil Mack on Wilkinson or even Bowles with Leonard Floyd and then slipping out. So hopefully holding those type of blocks long enough that the linebackers commit to their zone or a blitz maybe, and then you can slip out and let the playmaker do something in space. So that's one thing I need to do. And really, you just need to play complementary football. The Bears defense is great. I already touched on it. So it's going to be more about treading water and not doing stuff to lose. I am excited to see what the pass game can do. In this game, I thought Flacco was okay last week. Not great, but better than what they've had. And you're going to see, Cortland Sutton put up his best game. Can he go do better there? Can Emmanuel Sanders get involved in the first half? That's stuff I want to see, but just really need to do that. But overall, as lame as it sounds, looking at the Bears personnel versus the Broncos personnel, you just have to play it kind of safe and hope that your defense can show up and be better than they were last week. And as long as you put the defense in good situations, I think you have a chance.
Right. As the Patriots always say, let the other team beat themselves.
Yeah.
Let
the
Bears
defense
just
have talent everywhere.
Right, they do. And so you definitely don't want to force anything. They will force turnovers. I mean, they were the best team in the league at that. And it's why their offense was able to not be dominant and still have a pretty good, overall team. They had short fields. They could still get points. And I thought the Packers actually did pretty good with that, where they protected the ball for the most part. And they took their chances when they had them. but otherwise they just kind of played pretty conservative throughout the game. And so I'm with you.
I just want to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying. I mean, I just think that's a very good game plan. Even. I mean, I hope we put up more than 10 points. But
first half,
right? But I mean, the Packers won by putting up 10 points, and so you don't have to do a lot to beat this Bears offense, as long as you're not beating yourself. I mean, you still got to do some. You still got to take a couple chances here and there, but you don't have to go crazy and think, okay, we're going up against the Chiefs, we have to score 30 points. That's not this kind of game.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And something also I want to point out or hope for, Broncos defense needs to create some turnovers in this game. And against the Bears and Mitchell Trubisky, I mean, that there's a chance to do that. If the Broncos get a good field position, they're starting at the 50, they need to come away with points. Yards are going to be hard to come by. Bears are going to be playing a more aggressive style than what they did under Fangio with Chuck Pagano. He likes to do more blitzes. And the tendency for some big plays are there because of that. But if the Broncos defense or the Broncos special teams even gives the Broncos a chance to get the ball on the Bears side of the field or just any sort of short field, Broncos got to take advantage. They really do have to take advantage.
Well, you think about last week. That was one of the issues, that they got in field goal range and then gave up sacks or had penalties that kicked them out of field goal range. I think they did that 2 or 3 times in the game. So you think about that they had red zone issues, and then they had issues when they got into scoring range. I mean, that's a lot of points that they left on the board in that game. Yes, they did not look great, but they still were right there in it and had their opportunities, and they just made those crucial mistakes that cost them. And like you said in this one, you can't have that. You can't leave points on the board against the Bears, because it is going to be a low scoring game, and a missed field goal here or getting kicked out of field goal range or not being able to move the ball after a big turnover when momentum switches, all those kind of things are just they're just killers in this kind of game.
Yep. And even furthermore, we're talking planning offense and defense, but Colby Wadman, my guy, you need to have yourself a game. And honestly, I'm more worried about the coverage units themselves than Wadman. But if the Broncos can continually pin the Bears back in their own shadow of the goalpost, 10 yards from the goal line, that's really going to give the Broncos a chance, because I don't see the Bears marching the ball 90 yards down the field. Bears' offensive line is solid, blah, 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 but it's really their defense. So even if you're losing, not scoring points, the special teams is going to be absolutely huge in a game like this in the field position battle. Obviously, anything can happen, but on paper, that's what it looks like it'll happen. I mean, we're talking about how much this will probably be a low-scoring game. It'll end up being like 50-40 or some crazy thing, but it's really a crazy defense. And honestly, I think the personnel on this Bears team might be even better than it was last year. I mean, they did lose, obviously, Bryce Callahan, Adrian Amos, and honestly, that's pretty much it. I mean, they still have really good underrated boundary corners in Kyle Fuller and Prince Amukamara. Kyle Fuller he's one of the best 5 cornerbacks in football right now. They brought in Buster Skrine, who's a solid nickel. Brought in HaHa Clinton Dix, who was a former first-round pick. Eddie Jackson's probably one of the best 3 safeties in football. And their front 7, I think, is better. Obviously, it starts with Khalil Mack, top 3 defensive player in football. Even though he didn't get a sack last week against Aaron Rodgers, he was dominant. He made poor Billy Turner just go through PTSD on one of those plays, just absolutely obliterated him when they lined Mack up over the guard. And then they obviously have really a lot of talent in Akeem Hicks is a name to know. Eddie Goldman, really solid, but their depth and the younger guys as well in that front 7. I mean, Roquan Smith, 8th overall pick 2 years ago. There was a series in the Packers game where I was like, holy crap, Roquan Smith is incredible. So much speed, ability to move around, coverage, coming downhill. I mean, he looks small, but his speed and processing is insane. And obviously Danny Trevathan next one. But Roquan Smith, Danny Trevathan's obviously really good. Broncos fans know that. But Roquan Smith has a chance to be elite. And then the other guys, the young guys on there in that front 7, you have Leonard Floyd, who made David Bakhtiari look silly on a play. I mean, David Bakhtiari is the best left tackle in football, folks. And he beat David Bakhtiari on a power move. So, watch out for Leonard Floyd versus Garrett Bowles. And then they have some young interior guys coming to their own. Blaile Nichols from Delaware, 5th-round pick 2 years ago, really solid. And then they have a guy that I liked a lot every time I've watched the Broncos play the Bears in preseason. He's a guy giving the Broncos trouble. He's so obvious to see, too, is Roy Robertson Harris. he's an interesting player because he's so long. He's a little skinny for the defensive line, but 6'6", 260 pounds. And in pass rush downs when he comes in, I mean, he's really disruptive. So this Bears defense, talent everywhere, talent across the board. And so that, I mean, obviously different coach, things will change, injuries, and, we'll see. But man, just so much talent on that Bears defense from an individual personnel perspective. So offense, protect the ball, run the ball effectively, hopefully, get some shots in, but don't lose this game because you give the ball away.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, they are just a completely talented group, and from top to bottom, I mean, I'd put them up against any defense and say, let's rank these guys against each other, and I'm pretty sure the Bears would come out on top against all but maybe one or two defenses, maybe. I mean, there's a reason that they finished first last year, and it wasn't just all Vic Fangio. I mean, like you said, great players make great coaches, and he definitely had a lot of talent to work with, and he helped build that defense up. I mean, he found the players that fit his system very well, and now the Broncos are trying to do the same, and it's going to take a little bit of time. I mean, we saw that in the first game, that some of these guys are still learning the system and still learning what they need to be doing, and hopefully as the season progresses, the defense will get better. But now switching to the other side of the ball, this is the weakness on weakness. So it's well, I guess not weakness on weakness. Sorry, Broncos defense strength. They should be a strength. As we'll see if they improve over week one for sure. But this Bears offense, nothing to get too worried about. They have a decent offensive line, not great or dominant or anything like that, but it's a very above average group. I think they have plenty of talent on that line. They have some good tight ends. Trey Burton, very, very talented tight end that got most of his attention really for his time in Philly, but he's done plenty of great work there for the Bears as well. And of course, their running back room, that is one area that they have changed a little bit. They do have Tariq Cohen, one of the great receiving options out of the running back position. I mean, we've talked about it on here of how important that is, of having a receiving option out of the running back position. And then they have Mike Davis coming over from Seattle, and then they drafted David Montgomery, their very first pick in this last draft, because they had traded so much of their draft capital to get Khalil Mack, of course, and that's paid off wonders for him. But David Montgomery was the guy that they traded up for, and really that first game, I thought he was the one piece on offense that seemed to be consistently doing something positive. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. Yeah, no, he's super talented, and if Todd Davis is not good to go, I know Todd Davis isn't the fastest guy, but I mean, Corey Nelson was horrible against the Raiders, so I would be concerned about both those running backs. And it was crazy that Nagy went away from the running game especially when you have a defense like that. I understand if you have the quarterback and the weapons around him to take advantage of the pass game, that's what you should do. But if you don't, the run game still needs to come into play. Yeah.
I thought they definitely abandoned the run game way too quickly in that game against the Packers there. And then the player that really is going to make or break their season, Mitch Trubisky. And
Money Mitch.
Yeah. He was that guy that draft with Deshaun Watson and, of course, Mahomes. And Mitch Trubisky was that first quarterback taken. The Bears even traded up to get him one pick. And so far, he's been about as inconsistent of a quarterback as there is. I mean, he has his decent games, and then he has his downright terrible games. I mean, this last week was one of his downright terrible games. And it's one of those, I think, if he is allowed to really especially improvise, if he's allowed to get outside the pocket, if he's allowed to use his legs, he can go have a really good game for their offense. But teams that can really force him to stay in the pocket, be a true pocket passer, have to go through his reads, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, however many reads they have on the play. That is where you can really get him. Those are the games where you've seen that he really, really struggles. The Packers did such a good job with their pass rush of keeping him in the pocket, not letting him escape to be able to take off with his legs, keeping things in front of them, and just not giving him what he wanted. And I was just very, very impressed with how the Packers handled Mitch Trubisky. And I'm really hoping the Broncos try to do a lot of the same things that the Packers did. And so I do think this is a game where they're going to look back on that tape against the Packers and say, we got to run it more. And they're going to look at that, obviously the Broncos versus the Raiders game and say, wow, Broncos defensive line did not do a good job at stopping the run. And so, like you said, I really hope Todd Davis plays because that is a huge difference in how the Broncos can attack the run. I mean, like I said, Corey Nelson, I'm glad they brought him back, but he had a terrible game, and he's more of a pass defender than he is a run stopper. And having him in there on running downs was just not good coaching, I would say. I mean, I know that they were trying to make sure that they wouldn't get passed on with those linebackers because it was not a good group, but oh man, it was bad. And so for this game, if I'm the Broncos, I'm selling out to stop the run. I really am making the decision that I'm going to have, if we're going to lose this game, if our defense is going to give up plays, it's going to be on the throwing arm of Mitch Trubisky. I'm going to load up the box, make him have to really try to push the ball down the field. I think he is a pretty good passer down the field, but if you can get some pressure on him, if you can keep him in the box, make him hold on to that ball just a hair bit longer, that is when the Broncos can really take over. And then I want to throw some exotic blitzes at him. We talked about it on the last episode that the Broncos just really didn't call a lot of blitzes, which, I mean, is understandable because the Raiders were getting the ball out so quickly. A blitz just means less guys to help cover. But in this one, I do think that Trubisky is one of those guys that likes to push the ball down the field. And if his first read's not there, he will hold on to the ball. And so just be a little bit more aggressive this week. I think you can force some turnovers. Like you said, if the Broncos can force turnovers and get the ball in favorable position, they can go win this game. If they're going to sit back and just let Mitch Trubisky throw the easy passes all day long and then let them establish the run, it's going to be another long day for the Broncos.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Could make it difficult. And the Bears, I mean, really it's those running backs, the running game that I'm concerned about. But on tape, I mean, I don't know how much you caught the Bears game last week, but Allen Robinson really was impressive. Right? Like, he was making plays. Good sign for Cortland Sutton because that's who I compare him to. Both those guys had good week ones and a loss still, where the offense still was not great on either team. But Allen Robinson against Yadam concerns me. And also I think this Bears team has an underrated offensive line. You know, Charles Leno at left tackle is pretty darn solid. I mean, they paid him good money. We got two left guards here from Kansas State going head-to-head. I guess not actually head-to-head, but for both teams. Cody Whitehair and Dalton Risner, obviously. And then James Daniels at center, really good, young, talented player. I think he's only 21 years old. And Kyle Long at right guard. So this is an underrated Bears offensive line, in my opinion.
They are. I mean,
they're not great,
right? That's exactly what I'm saying. They are. I mean, and they, like you said, they do have some pretty good weapons there. Allen Robinson, I've always been a big fan of his. The injuries and just not having a great quarterback when he was there with the Jaguars definitely hurt him. And they have. You always talk about it of having different styles of wide receivers and weapons. This is a team that has a lot of different weapons. You got Riley Ridley. I was a guy that was pretty high on him, not as high as his brother Calvin, or is it cousin? Was it brother?
I think it's his brother.
Brother. Calvin, I thought was a little bit more consistent, but Riley Ridley is a good route runner.
You know what Riley Ridley's first name actually is?
What is it?
Kevin.
Really?
Yep, that's why he goes by Riley, because it's too close.
Makes sense. And then,
of
course,
on NFL.com. I was like, what? This is wrong. They're actually putting everybody's first names down because they put like Thomas something for TJ Hawkinson. I was like, oh, okay, that's what it is.
Okay. Yeah. But then, of course, they have Patterson, who's kind of that can do a lot of things that other wide receivers can't do. Can make a big play out of nothing. And Anthony Miller, pretty good route runner, got a little bit of speed. Allen Robinson, your possession receiver. And so, again, they have a pretty good mix of weapons that you have to defend. But it is one of those things, again, I'm just making sure that Trubisky's the one that has to beat me. And I'm willing to give up a couple passes to be a little bit more aggressive, to force some turnovers, because I do think the offense needs that. I think the entire team needs that. just to get a little momentum going, to get a little more excitement going, because that first game, they came out so flat and just so conservative. I think this is one of those games where you kind of go a little bit the opposite direction, because the Broncos lose this game, the odds of them making the playoffs are pretty low.
Very low, especially going into Lambeau next week. So the Broncos start 0-3. There's only been 5 teams in 30 years that have made the playoffs after going 0-3. And considering the first quarter of the schedule is considered to be on the lighter side, considering what's coming up, not great. So this is a must win. Really, no other way to put it. I do want to ask you. I saw an interview on Twitter here right before we were recording that apparently Nagy is going to write up a complete new playbook for this game that Fangio has no idea or seen before. What do you make of that?
Oh, I mean, it could go either way.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the Bronco players always talked about how McDaniels would do that, and it was too difficult to learn. And so when you don't do what you've been doing for all these months, and then all of a sudden you have 80 new plays thrown at you, it can actually be very detrimental to the team of getting everybody on the same page. And so I would say be careful with that if I were Nagy. I mean, keep it simple as much as you can. And if you're keeping it simple, well, then it's not that much different. And really in the NFL, I mean, there's different plays that you can call, but a lot of the things are pretty similar no matter what you do. I mean, there's little mix and match things that you can do that you can throw at people. And I'm sure he's going to have his little surprise plays here and there, because the Bears are in the same place as the Broncos. They lose this week. Them making the playoffs is pretty tough. I mean, they got a tough division with, Minnesota looked very good first week. Obviously, Packers beating the Bears already gives them a 1.5 lead over them right now. And so, yeah, this is a must win for them as well. So it doesn't surprise me that he would come out and say that. And it might be just one of those kind of throwing something out there just to maybe confuse the coach. But
yeah, I thought it was maybe a little tongue in cheek.
Right. But I mean, it's Vic Fangio. This guy's seen everything. So I don't really worry about it too much.
Yeah, okay. I was just curious because I thought that was kind of funny. And since you were taking the Bears offense, if it impacted you at all.
No, not really. I mean, like I said, it's still pretty simple. Stop the run and see if they can beat you through the air. No matter what the playbook is, that's still going to be my game plan against them.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Well, we should probably take a quick break. We will be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I am Nick along with Carl. And we are now on to the matchups to watch. And Carl, I'll kick it off to you. What are the guys that you are really looking forward to watch in this game that are really make or break for how this game will play out?
Well, one of the few bright spots I thought of the past game for the Broncos was the interior play of Reisner and McGovern. I thought both of them actually had very, very solid games, if not great games. I think I saw something that PFF had Reisner graded as the second best left guard in week 1 in all of football. I mean, so it's one of those, you don't even have to make the disclaimer of he played great for a rookie. You can just say he played great for the NFL. But obviously things kind of amp up week 2. the interior of this Bears defensive line of Akeem Hicks, Eddie Goldman. I mean, those are 2 of the best interior defenders in football, and they're on the same team. And so, I mean, one, you're going to have to see Leary have a better game than what he had this last week. I think some of that might be just a little bit of rust, still trying to figure out from his injury how much he can do with his knee. But this is one of those games, okay, that rust is off. You better get ready to play because they need him to play. So if the Broncos can actually win in the interior, I like their chances of at least doing something on offense.
Yeah, that's a good point. I definitely think that's a big one. My first one will be Elijah Wilkinson. He's going to be filling in for Juwan James, who's going to be out for a bit. I'm guessing 6 to 8 weeks with a knee sprain. Could be 4, but we'll see, though. It's a week-by-week thing. But it's Elijah Wilkinson, and he's going to have to go up against a guy named Khalil Mack. And Khalil Mack, I mean, yeah, right. Well, you know what? I'm again, like I was talking about earlier, I'm not much of a shit talker. I like to make memes, I like to poke fun, but Khalil Mack is great. He's an amazing player. He's super strong, and he's one of the best defensive players in football. And the Broncos have a backup right tackle going up against him. I don't think we're on the menu for a Michael Schofield-esque level game from Elijah Wilkinson, but Mack is incredible, right? Like, he's an incredible player, and that single matchup could be the make or break of how this game plays out. Because last year, I don't know if you remember, but one of the things that many of the Bronco fans were hyping up with the Juwan James signing was how great Juwan James was against Khalil Mack. Well, now it's Elijah Wilkinson, who, the Broncos staff keeps talking great about him. Fine, that's whatever. But I thought he was up and down last week. Still young, still learning, can be a solid player, but not a plus in the pass game that we see from Juwan James, at least the upside from James. So Khalil Mack, he has a chance to really make an impact in this game. And when you have Garrett Bowles struggling on one end, and now you have a tackle that on the right side that needs help as well, you are in trouble. And then walks in Khalil Mack. So really nervous about that matchup. We'll see how it goes.
No, you're right. That should be one of the. Unfortunately, it's a very negative for the Broncos. And if Wilkinson can at least look average, you got to feel pretty good about that kind of matchup. But my second matchup, I'm going to go with Noah Fant versus Danny Trevathan and, of course, Roquan Smith. You already talked about them. Roquan Smith, one of the best young linebackers in football. We were big on our show of how much we liked him in the draft, and unfortunately the Broncos never really – they didn't have much of a chance to get him, at least compared to what they did take. And then, of course, Danny Trevathan. Bronco fans know all about this guy. Great player, great leader. I hated to see him go from the Broncos. I still say that was one of the few mistakes that I've really seen in players leaving Denver. There's other places to look at and how roster building and all that. But one of the areas that Elway has always done pretty good is players that leave don't seem to have a ton of success when they leave. Trevathan's one of those guys. He's had tons of success. And so I always loved him. But Noah Fant, I think he's one of those guys that he's just such a matchup nightmare. You got to take advantage of him. And the Broncos I didn't feel like they featured him enough in that first game. He made a couple nice plays, and at least in the passing game, not the run blocking game or the pass blocking game. He was kind of terrible in those areas. But as a receiver, I thought he did pretty good. And he was able to get himself open. I thought he did great on especially the play where Joe Flacco was rolling out to his right. And instead of just continuing across the field, he kind of slowed down just to find that little gap. And so I just want to see him have a little bit more opportunity. And if he can win this week, especially in the passing game, that'd be such a huge boom for the Broncos because he is going against some very talented players there in Chicago.
Yeah. Nope, you are correct. He needs a bounce back game, and we'll see if this isn't a great matchup for him. Not only the linebackers, but the safeties as well. You're not going to see as much two safeties deep look. So potentially Eddie Jackson, potentially Clinton Dix coming down and matching up as well. So it'll be interesting. My next one, I kind of hinted at it earlier, but we talked about Fant having a poor game. Nobody on the Broncos probably had a worse game than Isaac Yiadom. I almost start to feel bad for the kid at that point. Doesn't look ready for it, starting getting in his own head, and then things spiral from there. But I think that hopefully you'll put Chris Harris Jr. on the likes of Allen Robinson. He's easily the Bears' best receiving weapon, but there's going to be times where it doesn't work out that way. So when Allen Robinson is up on Isaac Yiadom, that is a big concern for me. Because Allen Robinson, he can win deep and he can win short. He's more of that outside threat, not really winning over the middle so much. But if Yiadom is giving him huge cushion, and considering Yiadom isn't the best at the catch point, and Allen Robinson, that's where he makes his money. That's a matchup that could create some huge game-changing plays for the Bears.
Yeah, I hope he has a bounce-back game, or that the Broncos figure out a better way to put him in a position to have success. I thought him playing 10 yards off on every single play, you're not setting him up for success.
But at the same time, if you feel like you can't give up the help, right? Or if you're playing him close, would you rather him give up the short passes like they were, or potentially 40-yard gains?
And I get that. I guess it was just seeing them go through the slow bleed every single play.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but it's not as much of a killer as if you gave up a 60-yard touchdown.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it just, I feel like they could have at least mixed and matched a little bit more at times just to keep them guessing a little bit. I mean, it was pretty obvious. Okay, well, he's 10 yards off. Just throw the quick out. Okay. I mean, it made everything so simple for Carr, got him into a rhythm, made him comfortable, got the run game going, got the Broncos on their heels. It just, everything about it was not setting up well for the Broncos. And so for me, I was just kind of going, this is where you do the shock to the system. You take a shot. You take one chance and see what happens. And if that doesn't work, well, it's fine. I mean, you're still losing anyway. But I mean, that's just, I'm a little bit more of a risk taker in some of these things, especially when you're 1 down by 14 and 2, a team that's probably not going to be making the playoffs. So you got to take a chance here and there to win some games that others would expect you not to win. And so, what's your final matchup then? Because I know you got one more than me.
Well, it's got to be Vic Fangio versus Matt Nagy. You know, who's Fangio not the best calling last week, and Nagy's the guy who, I mean, former head coach. So that's going to be a big storyline in this game, and it's going to be kind of fun to see those guys go up against each other and see the game of cat and mouse that is the Broncos' supposed strength against the Bears' weakness, but also can you call Nagy the master? Because he was the head coach. I think Fangio has nobody is his master. Maybe Elway, but or the Broncos roster kind of is a master to him as well. But yeah,
I guess it's one of those you kind of look even back to 2015. Was Kubiak the master or was Wade Phillips the master?
Yeah, Peyton Manning was the master.
Well, that's true. That is true. But I mean, I look at Kubiak and some of the decisions he made. I'm going, oh my gosh, you got so lucky that you had a defense like you did. Just, I mean, mixing Peyton Manning into Kubiak's offense, not a great fit. Should have been a little bit more of let's stick with what Peyton likes more than what Kubiak likes. But I mean, that's just me. But, I mean, obviously Wade Phillips, the players loved him and he called some great games. And so, I mean, Kubiak's a great coach. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to discredit Kubiak or anything like that, but there are times where sometimes a coordinator can really outshine a head coach. And sometimes head coaches don't always like that. I always think of McDaniels I'm trying to remember who was the defense coordinator.
Don Wingendale. I have no idea.
I can't remember. Oh man. But the guy, I mean, when they went 6-0, the offense wasn't why they were winning. The defense was. And then of course McDaniels gets mad that the defense is wide. So he's like, no, call the game how I want you to call it. Idiot. But that's McDaniels. So we'll leave it at that.
McJerk face. So, all right. Well, we should probably take another break here. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I'm Nick along with Carl. Carl, some superlatives, and I will just fire them off to you. This just a little fun little section here. The Broncos win if
they win the turnover battle.
Turnover battle. All right, for me, mine is going to be that they create at least 8 third and 6+ yards. Last week, the Broncos, I think they only had one play in the entire game where it was like third or 6+, and that's not a recipe for winning. You know, you got to earn those third down pass rushes by winning in first and second down and giving your defense a chance to pin their ears back. So didn't get a chance to do that. Turnover battle is a great one. Obviously, one of the most indicative things in winning in the game. But I'm going to go with creating third and longs for the Broncos defense to hunt. All right, the Broncos lose if they lose the turnover battle.
Well, I mean, it is pretty simple that way.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't a team that can overcome those kind of things. I'd say they lose if they fall behind by 10 or more points. I mean, just they got to start out faster than the last game. I mean, being down 14, there's not many games you're going to come back and win that way. And so I do think they lose if the Bears are the first to really score. And I mean, not just a field goal. I'm talking like touchdown.
Yeah, I do not disagree. I will say that the Broncos lose if they do not get the lead early. I think they need to get the lead in the first half That way they can control the flow of the game, open up the run game a little bit more. But if they're playing from behind and letting this Bears team dictate, yikes.
Yep.
So, all right, MVP of the game if the Broncos win.
Oh, man. I guess I'm going to go Shelby Harris. I thought he had a pretty bad game this last game. Now, he was going against Hudson, which is he's a very good center. But it just seemed like he was getting blown back a lot, and just that run game is running right up the middle, right at him. And so for me, this game, if he can get any kind of push, if he can make a couple negative plays, I mean, you already talked about it. They got to get some long third downs, and they can't get pushed up the field and let the Bears really control that part of the defense. And so I think Shelby Harris, I think he could have a really nice bounce back game.
Yeah, definitely agree with you. I think my MVP of the game, if the Broncos win, I'm going to go with Justin Simmons. Did not have a great game last week, but I think that he has a chance to take the ball away, and that's really what it comes down to. So I think we need to see some turnovers. The guy I think that it could happen with, Justin Simmons. So the GOAT of the game if the Broncos lose. And I'm not talking about the acronym GOAT, greatest of all time, but the old school GOAT, where the guy, that guy is the horse's ass, so to speak. He's the one at fault.
Right. So, I mean, the easy choice would be Wilkinson, but I'm actually going to go with the other side, Bowles, because I do think the Broncos are going to give Wilkinson is probably more help than they are Bowles. And, I mean, it was easy to see. Bowles didn't have a great game. He was okay. I mean, he actually did decent in pass protection, but run blocking, which was his strength last year, he did not show up very well. There's a lot of plays he looked very confused on what his job was. And, I mean, he's going to be going against probably a much better pass rusher in this one and Leonard Floyd. And the Broncos need him to be able to handle his business and being one-on-one.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. My GOAT, if the Broncos lose, I think it'll be Flacco. Offensive line's not great, but if Flacco is out there, feeling like he has to do too much and throwing the ball away to the other team and not, converting the gimmies when they're there, that's the big thing. So, all right, and key stat of the game.
I mean, since I already said turnover, no, I'm going to go with something different here. I think if the run game can average over 4 yards a carry, I think the Broncos stand a very good chance in this one. This is a very tough team to run against, and so if they can be consistent in the run game, I like their chances of winning this one.
Okay, not bad. I think this one will be sack surrendered. So the Broncos give up the 2.5. Under that, the Broncos win. Over it, the Broncos lose. So, and all right, final one, player who must step up.
Well, I'm going to go with Noah Fant. There was a lot of plays, especially in the run game, where he got beat, or the pass game where he just got beat pretty bad. It was a bad first game for him blocking. And that was something that the team was very, very excited about with him. And if he can step up, if he can be that consistent player, both as a blocker and as a receiver, man, it just makes this offense so much more dangerous.
All right. And mine for me, I'm going to go with Josie Jewell. He had a solid game last week, kind of making up for Corey Nelson, but he needs to have another good game. I mean, who knows if Todd Davis is going to be back. So I'm going to go with Josie Jewell. He's got to be strong over the middle, and that's a big thing. So, and also something, we should have talked about this earlier, but it's a really funny trend with Mitchell Trubisky is that I was hoping you would bring this up, but he absolutely cannot throw left. You know about this, right? Like, he cannot throw to the left. So, play Yadam on the left. And if he's making the plays there, he's breaking the trends. But the fact that he's just, outright sucks there, great. Great. Like, make him throw to the left. So that's a big thing that I'm looking for there. All right. Well, we've done all of that. Carl, your prediction.
This is one of those, I've gone so much back and forth just because both teams look so terrible week one. I mean, the Bears have had that extra time, but it's at Mile High. Broncos don't lose there very often. And so I went ahead and I gave the Broncos this one. Broncos 17, Bears 16. I do think the defense forces a couple turnovers that help secure the victory. And I think having Todd Davis back, it sounds like he's going to be back for this one. I think that'll really amp up the defense and just change some of that outlook on what they were giving up this last game. And he's kind of that energy bug for him. I mean, they talked about that he broke down the huddle at practice for the first time since well, I don't think he has since training camp started. And like they could just feel a lot more energy is what the media talked about. And so for the Broncos, that's exactly what they need. They need some more energy, and I think he brings it. Broncos win. What about you?
For me, win the turnover battle, win the field position battle. Punting is winning. That's a classic saying we like here in Iowa, kind of make fun of the offense. But I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I have the Broncos winning 13-9, and just both teams are probably going to be trying to play offensively not to lose while trying to win defensively. So I think it'll be conservative game plan, first team to blink as far as making a stupid play. I think that's the one that wins. So 13-9, Broncos win. And honestly, the big reason that I have this, I brought this up before, but I just love the stat too much. Since the Broncos opened up their new stadium in 2011, the Broncos, you know what their record is at home since 2011 in weeks 1 or 2.
I think they've only lost twice. Is that right?
21-1.
Okay.
And since the AFC-NFC merger, 51-8-2. So, guys, crazy. That's such a crazy stat. I know that the Bears have had an extra 4 days to prepare, which absolutely just screw you, NFL, right? Like, mind-blowing for me. That's really annoying, especially with considering how physical that Monday night game was. But either way, some trends are going to have to kind of buck there because the Bears having 4, they pretty much had a bye week to prepare for this game where the Broncos are on the least amount of time a team can possibly have between a Monday night game because it was a late Monday night game and playing Sunday. So screw you, NFL, and not great. So any final thoughts before we wrap it on up?
No, I don't think so. I think this should be a fun one, another close one for the Broncos. I think there are going to be a lot of those one-score games this year. Yeah. And hopefully the Broncos can have a few more that end up in their favor instead of losing like they did. But I don't know. I'm looking forward to this one. I'm still hopeful for the Broncos getting a nice win here and building a little bit of momentum.
Yeah, it's a must-win. It's a must-win. 0-3, looking down the barrel of 0-3, not good. So got to win this one. All right, well, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. Hope you all enjoyed it. We'll see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.